Hope everybody's doing well. Really excited to get back and going. Obviously, I mentioned after I think our last ball game that there were some things that I was really excited about, and as a coach, you're looking for these moments, the opportunities that the kids have, and then that they kind of show you different things. And during the off week, and obviously the earlier practices this week, which we've just had one on Sunday, some of those things are coming to fruition right now. And so quite honestly, I'm really excited about kind of where we're at. As Alex mentioned, obviously we still have some young men that are out for the season, but the rest of that group, basically 10 other guys now are back with us, and they're practicing. And that's exciting, too, and it's brought some energy, I think, to our practices, because many of those players are not just guys that were starters, but guys that are seniors and have been around. They bring leadership, too. And I think it has created a significant amount of energy in practice. We had one of our better practices that I've seen us have since we've been here on Sunday. And I think that's going to carry through to today, because I think they're seeing some of the same things that I'm seeing. And so, quite honestly, I'm very excited to watch us play on Saturday. We're playing against a team that I think I have just tremendous respect for Dennis Franchione. I've known Coach Fran for a long time. And I think Dennis has done one of the if you look at his career and what he's done every place, he's done a phenomenal job. He's a program builder, and he's doing that there at Texas State. And you can see that in this football team. There's no question that they're continuing to improve. And they're I think, gaining respect in relation to how they've done this, because Coach Fran's going to do it the right way all the time. And I'm talking about the way that he runs the program and the way that the kids react and how hard they play and so on. And then obviously they've got some significant new facilities that they just built. I've seen some video of those, and those are just phenomenal. And that's I'm sure helped him in recruiting also. And so consequently, we're know that we're going to be taking on a very good football team, one that has the same record as we do, and anxious to get back to playing. Questions?
Arkansas State has been kind of a nemesis here in the past few years, where I don't think you've beaten in your time as head coach at ULM. You get to go against John Thompson, now the defensive coordinator at Texas State.
Right.
What kind of similarities have you seen of what he did at Arkansas State compared to what he's doing at Texas State?
No, John's done a great job every place he's been, and that's why he's relatively sought after. John's going to continue to work, and I've known John forever too. We're kind of the same age, and I knew him from when he was back, even when he was at Northwestern State at one point in time. And then obviously, whenever he was at East Carolina University as the head coach there, I was the head coach at Army, so we were in the same league, and got to know him pretty well just through chairing the conference coaches committee there for Conference USA. And John does a great job. He's very unpredictable. He does not have very strong tendencies, and he's willing to be extremely aggressive. And I think any time that you're willing to do that, then that shows significant confidence in your players. So this is going to be one of the most multiple schemes that we'll face, and it's very similar to in really all facets. I'm talking about their blitz structures, their fronts, and their coverages in relation to what he's been doing for years now, and has had great success with it.
You mentioned having everyone back. What does that do for the team morale of just having a lot of these guys? I think that you mentioned it about you look over next to you and you don't see that guy that's been there beside you for so many years. But do you feel like there's been a boost to just having those guys back?
I don't think there's any question. There is that. As you mentioned, you lose a guy, for instance, like Joe Treadwell, who started every game since he's been here. And then now you're the left guard, who was also new this last week, and in our last ball game anyway, that's having to play, not having that confidence of having Joe right next to you at left tackle. And so I think it's the knowledge base. I think that there's obviously a confidence thing that comes with playing with the guy that you know has contributed significantly to the program, whether they be a four-year starter or a first-year starter. And then there's that depth issue in terms of just the amount of snaps. And college football is really strange right now. I mean, it is. The game's much different than what it was 10 years ago, which is much more different than what it was 20 years ago, as we've talked about before. And I think one of the things that you're seeing all the way across college football, and I'll give BYU as an example, they lose one player. One player. And they would go from a top 10 program, can't even win a game. Right? Lost the quarterback. Great player. We lost Colton Browning. That was a struggle. Last year, Lafayette lost Terrence Broadway and lost 2 immediate games, ours and the next one against South Alabama. And you take some significant players out of your program, and it changes things. And I think that's what everybody's kind of battling right now. I think that's one of the reasons why there's so much momentum right now, because the game has become so specialized towards raising that scholarship number from 85 to 95. There's a lot of conversations about that. We've talked about the goods and the bads of that. But that's part of the reason why they're doing that, is the game has become much more specialized. And if you lose a couple players, it's not like you can transition a guy from one side of the line to the other side, or one side of the ball to the other side of the football, which used to be actually relatively easy. I went from playing quarterback one week to getting ready to start at free safety the very next. And but the game was much simpler then. And it's not like that now. And so the injuries do have some impact, and again, we're seeing it all across the country, and I'm just elated for those young men that have put in a lot of work, that they're going to have a chance to get back this week and start playing again.
After the open date, how much of this is a fresh start for you guys? I mean, did you have a chance to regroup and just kind of organize or figure out where you guys are in your season? So how much of a fresh start is this for you?
Well, I think that anytime that you have an open date, there's going to be a little bit of a fresh start, because the way this one's worked out in particular, because you kind of had the first quarter, the second quarter, now we're kind of entering the second half. And now we've got to, be a little bit road warriors again. Obviously, this one's going to be a home game, but the majority of the rest of them are going to be on the road. And, we're back healthy, and so that obviously that creates some freshness to you because of being healthy and feeling good, and your body feeling good, that type of thing. Unfortunately, with some of the injuries we've had, you'd like to have those early games where you could have some tune-ups where you created some depth. We've created some more depth forced on us, quite honestly, because of some of the injuries. And that's helped us too, quite honestly, because I think we know now from a coaching standpoint, we're not maybe as nervous about putting a guy in the game because we know that he's more ready to play than we knew before, when we were concerned about being able to put him in, not knowing how he was going to react. And then there's some guys that we know that aren't ready to play yet, too, and that's been demonstrated also. And so I think there's a comfort level for our football team and for our staff that has happened now because of this. And then obviously during the off week, we were able to adjust some things based off some of that depth, and I think those adjustments went really well. And so, again, probably at this point in time, most everybody would have probably said that our record would be exactly where we are right now. Matter of fact, I think the pundits in Vegas actually had us being a little less than this. And so we know that we had some close games. Some of them we won, some of them we lost. And now we've learned from those experiences, and now we get to, again, have that fresh start coming in the second half of the season.
The injuries that were able to come back after last week, were any of them kind of a surprise to you that you didn't think you would have them back this quick?
No, I don't think so. I have quit guessing, though, on things like that because, again, it's not my realm of expertise, and so we let the doctors and our training staff handle those things. The only thing that I ask from both of them is to give me some type of realistic number, and, I don't want great optimism, but I don't want great being a pessimist either. How come I couldn't say that? That's amazing. And so I think our staff, I'm talking about our doctoral staff and our training staff, have done a wonderful job in relation to keeping us abreast of kind of where everybody's at. And so I'm not surprised, but I don't get surprised by much anymore along those lines.
This is the halfway point. You were able to have a bye week as well after that sixth game of the season. Reflecting back on kind of halftime of the regular season,
right.
What are some of the biggest things that you learned about your team that you didn't expect, or were some surprises that you didn't anticipate maybe after fall camp?
Obviously, no. I think we're always going to self-assess after every ball game. We're going to do an after-action review, and during the off week, as it did last time, and I kind of mentioned it before, that gives us an opportunity to go back and really study video. The technology now allows for this just immediate, hey, I want to see this, and I want to see it only in this down and distance, only in this field position, which was not possible back in the old days, and that's part of the reason why the game has become more complex. But we work very, very hard on our own tendencies and our own self-assessments, because most of the time, most games are not won; they are lost. And what I'm mentioning is the fact that it's not so much the opponent most of the time; it's your own efficiency that hurts you. And obviously, some opponents are better than others, and we all can understand that, and that's why they have all the rankings and so on. But most of the time, you tend to hurt yourself more than the other team has some impact. And so we've done that self-assessment, but in relation to, is there – I don't know that I would look back right now and say that anything has really, really shocked me. I knew we were going to go out and play hard. I knew that I felt like we had a very, very good defensive football team coming in, and I think that's kind of proved to be true. I think that I would have liked to have, again, as I've mentioned, I thought we could be a little bit better up front on offense, and some of that has to do with some injuries. But I thought we could run the football more effectively and control the line of scrimmage better. And so I think that's kind of an ongoing thing. But we're again excited to have everybody back. But I don't know that there's been a lot of surprises, so to speak.
You mentioned that you want to get the proper mix between running the ball and throwing it. And that was
No, I didn't mention that. You mentioned that. I don't care if we run or throw it. I really don't. I just want to win. And so if we throw it 70 times and that's what it takes to win, then, hey, I'm great with that. But if we have to run it 70 times, I'm great with that too. I think balance creates a little bit more confusion from a defensive perspective. But if the defense is going to rush 3 and drop 8, then throwing the football gets a little bit difficult, and you better be able to run it, or vice versa. If they're going to blitz everybody every snap, you better be able to throw it, because running into that extra hat is not kind of the answer. So balance is not something necessarily that we look for in the game. Balance is something we look for at the end of the season. I'd love for us to, at the end of the season, to look up and say we were very balanced, because what generally happens is if you throw the football real well, then the next opponent says, well, we got to take away the pass, and so they have to run it. And so that next game, you run it real well. And then the next team says, well, we better take away the run. And so I think you're looking for balance at the end of the season, because that's showing that you've done everything well rather than balance in a game. I'm not much into balance in a game.
What I was going to refer to, though, was you were talking last week about the fact that you guys had to have the mix in terms of play-action passes. You were trying to say that, okay, well, we have to set the run or set the pass.
Right.
That's the balance I was talking about, necessarily having an even between running and passing. So
Okay.
what I was going to ask as a follow-up to that was, what have you done in the bye week to kind of maybe reestablish your identity or reevaluate what you want to do in that regard? That really was my question.
Yeah, well, again, I think that's a little bit dictated by the defense. I think we have to be better at both. Now, I think that the run has got to be established, obviously, to play action, but the play action, as you mentioned, helps set up the run, too. I think that there's this other component to us that we've always kind of held on to a little bit that is a little bit different, in the fact that we can spread the field and throw the football, or we've done that in the past. And we've kind of shied away from some of that this year. And I'm at that point right now to where I think that there's some arrival there, too, for us right now. We've had enough work at it, even though it's not necessarily been demonstrated in a game, to where we can get back, if need be, and not have to rely necessarily on play action, but we could actually get back into some of those empty sets and throw the football around. And that's a vestige of the past, so to speak, but it's something that we've kind of hung on to, and I think we've got to that point now to where I feel pretty comfortable about being able to say that, if we needed to do that in a game, that we could be pretty efficient with it. And so I think that's probably the biggest change, is this continued growth rate and this continued chemistry from a passing game standpoint. The run game's never going to change that much. You're either going to move them or you're not moving them. The passing game requires, again, that chemistry and that orchestration that goes on between the quarterback and the receiver, and that is unique, and that requires some time. And I'm feeling much, much better about where that's all at, and that's probably one of the reasons why I'm a little bit more excited right now, is because I'm seeing all those things start coming together, and I think our players are too.
You had the bye week, so you would have been able to sit and watch Texas State anyway, probably. But since they played on Tuesday night last week, you got a few more extra days, I guess, to look, and they probably had a few more.
That's true, yeah.
But looking at the statistics they have offensively, Lafayette was able to hold them to I think 3 points until they're late in
Right.
the game. And I know a lot of people at Media Day talked about Tyler Jones, since he is one of very few veteran quarterbacks back in the Sun Belt. So what is it that they do well, and maybe just looking at that game, the way that Lafayette was able to stop what's
Yeah.
bread and butter?
Yeah, I think so much of this game is about matchups, and it's about style of play against style of play. And I think some of that had to do with that, because I think obviously they've put up significant numbers from an offensive perspective against a lot of very, very good people. I think they run the football really, really well. They've got, I think, really good running backs. Their offensive line, I think, they're athletic, they're physical. As you would expect, all of Coach Franchione's teams, their offensive lines are always going to be athletic and they're always going to be physical. And so they're running the football really well, and they present some problems to you in that their quarterback has the ability to run the option. And they've shied away a little bit from some of the option game from what they were last year, which they were almost predominantly all option. And I shouldn't say all option. That's not correct completely. But they have this ability to force you to be very, very disciplined. Now, you always want discipline, but their option game requires that you have somebody for all three individuals that might touch the football. And they do this in different ways. So it's not just necessarily the running back and the quarterback and another running back. I mean, they can bring receivers and that type of thing and get them involved in a pitch phase, that type of thing. And so they present some problems to you schematically. And then their quarterback is throwing the ball around real well, too, right now. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why they've gone away from some of the option is just to devote a little bit more time to maybe throwing the football around. He's doing a much better job than he was last year, I think, along those lines. Not that he was bad last year, but he's just improved, as you expect all guys to do as they're continuing to play.
How much is having Centarius back after leaving it's been forever now, it seems like, the Troy game, I guess?
Mm-hmm.
Didn't play against Kentucky, but I know that the running game wasn't able to get established as well, even whenever he was in the game. But with having those two, and we've talked before about the two different type of running backs, he and Tyler Kane are, how much will that help things maybe get established with having him back and healthy?
I think it makes a huge difference, because you've got a senior leader and you've got a very, very effective player. Not that Tyler wasn't. It's just that with Centarius and Tyler both, those are two pretty dangerous backs, and it's not the other backs aren't. It's just that Kalen Watson, I thought, did a really, really nice job for a true freshman against Kentucky and playing really in his first major snaps on offense. But he's still a true freshman, and there's still those. I really better not call this play, because he's in there for the first time, and that was a complex defensive structure that Kentucky was running. He might not pick up his protection. He might not hit the hole correctly, that type of thing. And I think when you have Centarius back and Tyler, these guys have been in the system. They understand kind of what's going on. And you couldn't just leave Tyler in there the whole time, because, again, this game requires a little bit of rest. Otherwise, you're going to have a bunch of other guys getting hurt. And I think that's kind of what happened to us against the Kentucky game. Not completely, but we wore down a little bit, because you had a bunch of guys out there that maybe weren't used to playing 75 snaps a game. And some of them, quite honestly, had to, especially in the offensive line. And I think we got progressively worse as the game progressed, because they're used to getting 10 snaps rather than 75. And I think to some degree that obviously with our running back situation and going back to that, that's where you have those fresh legs, and you don't have to, as a play caller, shy away from certain things. You can just let it all go and let those guys perform.
Obviously, it's a new year, but are you expecting that type of intensity and tight game that you guys had last season against them?
Yeah, I quit predicting those two, Ron. I don't have a clue. Again, there's not the game. There was a time frame when it was, I think, very, very easy to predict what was going to happen. And I mean, again, you have one injury, they have one injury, we have an injury. All of a sudden, there's a lot of things that change. That's just the way the game is right now. Our quarterback's hot, their quarterback's hot. It's. Again, game day for me is just it's another practice opportunity. I mean, I've really kind of got to that point where I kind of approach it along those lines. And certainly there's some energy and there's some difference, but I'm just saying in terms of what is you go out, you never know what you're going to see anymore. Which used to be, we had a great idea what you were going to see offensively and defensively, and now, and other people would probably say the same thing about us. You never know what you're going to get because everybody's trying to either hide their own scars and kind of pretty themselves up in a different form or fashion, or they're trying to take advantage of something that they think that you have that maybe they need to expose. And so consequently, there's no games that play out the way that they used to where you have this great idea about how a game's going to play out. And so I'm more concerned about us giving great effort, playing the game the right way in terms of the way that we handle ourselves emotionally, that we try to take the best advantage of what we're seeing, obviously, in terms of adjusting on the run, and then that we're basically coaching and teaching during that time frame that, hey, this is something new. Let's coach this thing up. It's again, doing this for 32 years. It's just amazing how far the game's come. And we don't have the advantage the NFL does in relation to being able to show the guys on the sideline, hey, look at this picture. Then now you get it. We don't have that advantage, even though our game is. I think even most of the NFL coaches would tell you is in some ways maybe more complex than the NFL because of the nature of the offensive structures, because the quarterback will run and there is option football and there is all these other things that they're not necessarily having to kind of deal with. So.
You kind of alluded to this a little bit with the bye week and reestablishing who you are on offense and things, and we've talked before about bye weeks come at good and bad times.
Right. Yeah.
Off of an SEC context and getting back into a conference play, and of course with the injuries. But what really was the bye week spent maybe doing just to, once the second half of the season starts, to come out and knowing that all your goals are still ahead of you?
Well, I think that's obviously important to reestablish that all the goals are still out there and ahead of us. And it's tough coming off of a loss. There's no question. It's always easier going into a bye week when you're coming off of a win. But I think that sometimes those losses create some significant focus, and I think it did with our group. And I think that what it did was allowed us to get healthy, to create some more competition, because, again, we've had some exposures now to some of those down-the-line players and able to get those guys a few more snaps. And so we got that done, and then we spent a significant amount of time on our kicking game. One of the things that, again, with some injuries, the kicking game is the one where your depth always becomes significantly more fluid than offense and defense. Most of the time, if you lose your left tackle, your backup left tackle is going to come in the game. In the kicking game, that's not necessarily always the case because that guy's involved in a lot of other things. And so you might try to slide a guy from R3 to L5, and there's no the difference between R3 and L5 is significant, and that guy's got to try to pick that thing up on the run, and so I think that this last week allowed us to look at an awful lot more guys and cross-train some guys at some different kicking positions because we've had to kind of do that anyway, and that's created some more depth and some more opportunities, I think, in our special teams to. Especially within our coverage units.
how much, and again, I don't want to like take away from, well, if this guy was still injured, it'd be better that we had this guy back. But considering who they were and how much playing time they've had and what they've done, does that make it even more significant to have these guys back?
Well, obviously, yes, because they were starters. And the reason why they were starters is because there's already a difference. There was already this difference. Yeah, and I think the thing that gets lost sometimes in that, and we don't need to continue to dwell on, we've got them all back, but is there is an emotional part of this game too that leaders kind of bring when they're on the field, and there's a confidence that all the players have whenever they know that guy's on the field. And I think when you talk about Joe Treadwell and you talk about Centarius Donald and you talk about Ray Stovall, you're talking about three really, really significant leaders, not just football players, but leaders, guys that have been through an awful lot of games. I mean, you look at how many games that group right there just has started, and how long they've been in the program. And our team looks to that group as leaders, as guys that they can kind of count on. They know if I just keep playing hard, Ray's going to make a play, or Centarius is going to make a play, or Joe's going to make the big block. And so you lose a little bit of that too. And so there's a learning curve, I think, for all of those players when they don't see those guys out there. That, okay, now it's my time, and I've got to step up, and that next man up's got to do that. But for anybody not to say that it doesn't have an impact, or that, that's crazy, because if that was the case, then they wouldn't be starters. I mean, you'd have somebody else in there starting.
Last question. Looking at the standings right now, and you say this every year about the parity of this conference, and to see the way things have shaken up here at the halfway point, first of all, the way that Georgia Southern's come about,
Right.
They're, moving up from FCS, and some of these other teams who are making a push, and you mentioned the parity, and on top of that, just making this a very interesting conference. How does it also make your guys realize that anything really can happen on any Saturday, even though that's such a cliche comment?
Yeah, I think that's obviously. I think that our older players can appreciate what you said much better than our younger players, because our older players have seen this conference just go upside down in a hurry, and it is there is significant parity from an athletic standpoint, week in and week out in the conference, and so I know what our conference record is. Quite honestly, I don't know what anybody else's is, because trying to look and gauge and figure some of that stuff out, that's just a waste of time. I mean, we're really just now getting into significant conference play, in the sense that, over the next several weeks there will be a little bit more clarity. But to try to gauge where you're standing right now, it's too early, and there's too much football to be played, especially in this league when everything can just go crazy. And so you just take care of your own business. We're not trying to set up this or set up that and say, oh, this is going to happen and that's going to happen. I have no clue where we're at right now within the standings. I could not tell you who's. I think Georgia Southern. I don't think Georgia Southern's lost a conference game yet, and so they're probably up top. But the rest of it, I really couldn't tell you, and that's the truth. I mean, I'm not going to waste my time on stuff that I know that really doesn't matter. A few weeks from now, I might waste a little bit of time on it. Right now, let's just take care of this week.